Hi, welcome to Your Checkup. We are the patient education podcast where we bring conversations from the doctor's office to your ears. On this podcast, we try to bring medicine closer to its patients. I'm Ed Delesky, a family medicine resident in the Philadelphia area.
And I'm Nicole Aruffo. I'm a nurse.
And we are so excited you were able to join us here again today. We're not actually going to start recording the episode right now. What you're going to hear right now is my live reaction of the surprise meal that we had, that Nikki made. Because if you listen to the last episode, there was a surprise that she dropped on me live. And she said, when we recorded that, probably like a Sunday, she said, this Thursday, I'm going to make you dinner. It's going to snow, it's going to be cozy, and it's going to be perfect.
Okay, you act like I haven't made you dinner any other day of the week.
No, that's not true. You have.
Yeah, I had a very specific dinner in mind that I wanted to make because it was supposed to snow, although it snowed for like an hour. And I don't think it's going to snow anymore. But it's still really cold, and we could still have like a cozy dinner.
So there was an opportunity at some point during the week for me to help out and acquire the ingredients. And so this added to the game here where it was like, oh, what is she making? And I'm a dunce and had no idea. I went to the store. I got the French baguette. I got the Gruyere. I'm going to pause here and you sit at home and wonder, what did she make? Well, tonight, which will be a Thursday, I had the most delicious, step aside Steven Starr, park, goodbye, the best French onion soup that you could possibly imagine. It was delicious. Every time I took a bite, you a little like hesitation. You were like, is it good? Is it good?
Well, I've never made it before. This is my first time.
Knocked it out of the park. I can't even fathom how you come up with this to make these delicious meals out of nowhere, thin air. And we've gone on here multiple times, and like this podcast is half medicine, half food. And oh my God, the way that was so, you chopped up the little bits of the French baguette. You took the Gruyere, you shaved it, put it on top, put it in the broiler, bought separate bowls for the French
we needed
onion
like
soup.
The soup crocks. We don't have any of them.
Well, now we do. Oh my God. I'm not exaggerating either, because I had to, after finishing the meal, like belly is full, I had to get over here, and because it wouldn't have done justice if I left this marinate for a day, 2 or 3. I needed you all to know that I am the luckiest guy ever.
There's been a lot of yelling tonight, which means he really liked it.
Oh!
Well, I'm glad you liked it. And I'm glad that now we can use our soup crocks more because I can make it again.
Yeah, I mean, the magic question was like, oh, should I make this again? I was like, make it tomorrow. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Well, I used all of our onions, so can't do that.
Wow. Simple thing. A couple of my friends at work actually guessed it in 3 seconds when I told them the 2 ingredients.
Yeah, because they don't have a Y chromosome.
I was like, oh yeah, it's a French baguette and Gruyere. And they're like, oh yeah, you're having French onion soup tonight. I was like, what? I was stuck on quiche Lorraine. Yeah. No, and then I passed it along to them. And then we told Ollie that it could possibly not, in no way, shape, or form, be as good as his meal.
No, our dinners are never as good as his, and we tell him that.
Yeah. Well, some people took exception to that when I, made them aware, but insinuating that we lied to our child. And yeah, shamelessly, we do. I don't want him to feel left out. He gets the good T words though, and every once in a while, when there's a food that's okay for him,
he does.
He does. But maybe that's why he goes after the street snacks. That's a whole different conversation.
Oh my God.
All right. Well, here we go.
Here we go.
So, what are we going to talk about today, Nick?
Today we're talking about a hot topic and also a little bit of a history lesson. We're talking about measles.
Yep. Shouldn't be something that we have to talk about, but here we are.
Yeah.
Because the latest thing in the news is that there is a measles outbreak, and this information is as up to date as our recording on February 23rd at around 5 p.m. February 23rd, 2025, around 5 p.m. At this time, there are about 90 measles cases and rising in Texas. We're going to talk about more, but because this is happening, we felt it important to share with you all that we came to learn about measles, because people have stopped thinking about measles for a while because at one point it wasn't a problem. We're going to talk all about that today.
Yeah.
But let's get started. And without further ado, we'll do the news break. But let's get started. What is measles? Nick, this was your episode idea. Why don't you take it away?
Oh my gosh. Measles is a very highly contagious disease that is caused by a virus. It is actually one of the most contagious diseases. So contagious that if one person has it, about 90% of the people who are close to that person who are not immune to it will become infected. And then infected people can spread measles to others from about 4 days. So you get a rash with measles, so you can spread it about 4 days before through 4 days after you have that rash, which is kind of a long time.
It's a long time, and that is a ridiculous figure.
Yeah.
I think we're going to dive in a little bit more later about some other, like how it spreads. But that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's 9 out of 10 people who likely are unvaccinated at the time. This is the natural course of the disease. But holy crap. So tell us about the symptoms of measles. What generally happens and what sets it apart from other viruses?
So we have the classic like fever and cold-like symptoms. Also might see a loss of appetite, probably because you get these like spots and like sores in your mouth.
Yep.
Cough and sore throat, red runny eyes, and your eyes can be sensitive to light. And then the kind of like trademark of measles is the red rash that will start on your face and then kind of spread through the rest of your body.
Yep. And the rash and the red eyes are really like, and the Koplik spots is what they're called. The white spots on the inside of the mouth are the big things that set this apart from other viruses. Let's talk about, like, this is one of the reasons why measles is so important. And like, we've talked about other viruses on the show and we've been kind of blasé. We're like, oh yeah, common cold, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Everyone gets sick. But one of the key pieces about measles is how quickly it spreads. You mentioned not too long ago that if someone's in contact with someone in measles and they're not vaccinated, 9 out of 10 people in that room could get measles. How is it transmitted?
So it's spread through airborne transmission, which essentially means like it stays in the air longer than just like, for instance, like a cold or like flu or the COVID. that spreads by droplet transmission. So like the droplets of like a sneeze or a cough have to come in contact with you essentially.
Right. Yep.
Whereas airborne transmission
Scary.
is in the air and it stays in the air. Specifically with measles, it can stay in the air for 2 hours up after an infected person leaves that space.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, and like tuberculosis is a scary one, and that's also airborne. So like it's spreading just like these other crazy, awful things that you don't want.
Yeah.
I think also just to reiterate, like, okay, for example, I have measles. I go into a room, I'm breathing in the air, I leave. An hour later, someone who's not immune to measles can come in and just like be in that air and like breathing in those airborne particles, and then you're now infected.
Right. So that's like a real life scenario.
So that is, you don't need someone to like sneeze in your face or cough on you to get measles. All you have to do is breathe the same air that they are.
Yeah. So this is like any immune compromised individual. You can probably look at your TV tonight after you listen to this episode and see, if you really paid attention, you could probably come up with like 5 to 10 drugs that are on there that in some way, shape, or form make you immune compromised. That's one. And 2, infants born like less than 12 months old. We're going to talk about when infants get the vaccine, but those who don't have the vaccine are extremely susceptible to this. And we're going to, in just a moment here, we're going to take our bridge into another reason why measles is so bad. But I love that real life example that if you have it, you really need to be careful.
Yeah.
Because this is no joke. I mean, they were at like a couple cases and it took like a matter of days to get up to 90 in Texas. Yeah, and like former FDA leadership is like very concerned that this is going to take months to calm down because they spiked it. Like, who knows what the news is going to break Monday when this comes out. We had 93 in Texas was the closest information. But to speak more on that, so there is this measles outbreak that is currently happening. As of February 23rd, when looking up this information, there were 93 measles cases reported in 8 different jurisdictions. This included Alaska, California, Georgia, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York City, Rhode Island, and most Texas. There are 3 outbreaks have been reported in 2025 so far. An outbreak is defined as 3 or more related cases. 92% of the cases are associated with outbreaks right now. And so for really minute-to-minute information, there we have the Texas Department State of Health and New Mexico Department State of Health, because these are the places that are experiencing the measles outbreak the most right now. It's where it's the most active in our country.
Should we talk about some complications of measles?
Yeah, this is part of the meatiest part of the episode about why measles is so important. We spent some time talking about why it's so transmittable, why it's so contagious, but the real meat of it is that approximately 30% of measles cases result in 1 or more complications. So something else that happens, like aside from just those symptoms that you beautifully described earlier. Most deaths are due to respiratory tract complications or encephalitis. What the heck is encephalitis? It is quite literally inflammation in the brain.
That's bad.
Like, what a terrifying thing. You might not have even heard of this until this episode here. Diarrhea is probably the most common complication, and otitis media, which is an inner ear infection, occurs in 5 to 10% of cases, and a number of those result in permanent hearing loss. Another type of complication that happens is immune suppression and what we call secondary infections. A secondary infection is an infection that happens after the viral infection. So the measles infection, the measles virus, can lead to immune suppression. They took in studies, they've looked at the blood of people who've had measles, and the immune cells were less in number after the measles infection. And so some of these secondary infections can include bacteremia, or literally bacteria in your blood, pneumonia, a lung infection, gastroenteritis, puke, vomit. We've talked about that on like the neurovirus episode. And otitis media, that inner ear infection. And there's some evidence out there that says measles-associated immune defects may account for increased mortality for up to 3 years following infection. You can tell that there's a lot of impassioned conversation behind this, because we're going to get to why this shouldn't be happening, period. Mm-hmm. So to speak on gastrointestinal complications, we mentioned that diarrhea happens most commonly. This happens in about 8% of cases, 8 out of 100. So we have about 93, probably about 7 of them have diarrhea as well. Other GI-specific complications are like inflamed gums, inflamed liver, inflamed lymph nodes in the gastric system, and appendicitis. And as we mentioned earlier, pneumonia is the most common cause of measles-associated death in children. Respiratory tract infections occur most frequently among patients who are less than 5 years old and greater than 20 years of age. And these types of pulmonary complications aren't just limited to pneumonia, but they can include bronchopneumonia, laryngotracheobronchiolitis, or croup, and bronchiolitis, which we've talked about in other episodes. These next complications, I know we talked about pneumonia being terrifying because it causes death, but neurologic complications are insidious or obvious, and we'll explain why next here. So we talked about encephalitis, and it would be a more evident inflammation of the brain. It would result in different neurologic dysfunction, behavior changes, headache, irritability. But that happens in about 1 in 1,000 measles cases. So take it what you will. There is another brand, a cousin of a neurologic deficit called acute disseminated encephalomyelitis. That happens in about 1 in 1,000 measles cases. And then this one, which we learn in med school because it's so terrifying, is subacute sclerosing panencephalitis. And we talked about these neurologic symptoms happening in and around the time of getting a measles infection. The scary thing about this is this can occur 7 to 10 years after natural measles infection. So far after.
And it's fatal if you didn't catch on to that.
Yes. This happens less frequently than 1 in 1,000. I think when you get to that level of 1 in however many, it can get a little hairy. So it's rather rare, but it has been described and associated with natural measles infections. And so there's a lot of complications there, essentially to say that none of this stuff should be happening.
Yeah. Why shouldn't it be happening, Eddie?
Let's see. It shouldn't be happening because measles was eliminated from the United States. In fact, it was declared eliminated in 2000. If my math is right, that is 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Elimination is defined as the absence of endemic measles transmission in a region for greater than 12 months in the presence of a well-performing surveillance system. Why did this happen? A lot of reasons. We're going to talk about the measles vaccine very soon. But it turns out there is increasing global measles activity. The world has become a much more global community with travel.
Mm-hmm.
And so measles travels as well. I mean, we literally talked about it can live in the air for 2 hours after someone's there. And probably most importantly, the declining vaccination rates have led to reemergence of this virus.
Yeah. And not to sound, I actually was, not to sound like back in my day, this didn't happen, but quite literally back in our day when we were school-age children, this wasn't a thing.
Nope.
And that was only 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about this vaccine against measles, because it's a part of the routine pediatric schedule, but what can you tell us?
Well, the measles vaccine, it's in the MMR vaccine. It's what you'll hear when you're at the pediatrician. And so you get it in 2 doses. The first one is between 12 to 15 months. And then the second is a couple years later, around 4 to 6 years old. Doing 2 doses is 97% effective. And the 1 dose is 93% effective. So even that's still a lot.
Mm-hmm. 97% effective at preventing measles if you just participate in the routine recommended pediatric schedule for vaccinations. The concept of immunity doesn't just extend for someone's individual immune system. If we are to get back to a place where measles has been eliminated, and the reason that was able to happen is the concept of herd immunity. That concept is, one, to paraphrase, is that there are so many people who are immune to a certain virus. This commonly came up in the COVID conversations. If so many people are immune from either natural infection or vaccination, hopefully, there is no place for the virus to go to be contagious. And so to hit thresholds of herd immunity, we need very high vaccination rates, higher than 85. I think 95% is really the threshold. And in certain geographies in our country, the MMR coverage of the MMR vaccine is below that 95% target of herd immunity. And so that's how situations like this can arise. Because we need 95 out of 100 children to have this MMR vaccine, both doses, to be able to say this won't go everywhere. But we're not there right now. We're not there because probably deserves a whole episode on why people don't get vaccinated. When it comes to the MMR vaccine, we talked about this last week. There was a false study that came out that used fraudulent data.
Yeah, the fact that this is still even a thing is like actually infuriating.
And it used fraudulent data, and it posed that the MMR vaccine causes autism. And so vaccination rates dropped dramatically after that study came out. It was later investigated with something like 18 and counting extremely high quality studies that refuted that point over and over and over again, times 6. 18 times. They all looked at it against that one study, which they found uses falsified data and pulled to be retracted. But once that got out there,
it's the misinformation monster, like, of the century, probably, I would say.
Yeah. And now we're seeing it right before our eyes play out in the national media.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reason that one of the highest reasons that we talk about every day is, at least at work.
Well, I was just going to say that the timing of the MMR vaccine and the like timing of when a child will start to like kind of regress and show more symptoms of autism are basically the same. Like that first dose of the MMR vaccine around 12 to 15 months is kind of like that prime age of when you might notice a regression or showing some signs of autism. But the two are not linked. We will sit here until we're blue in the face. It's been proven, like you said, over and over and over and over again. And that is, the two are just not related.
I'm looking at you, RFK.
Yeah, it's just another misinformation thing. And all right, I don't know if you're going to cut this because this might be too harsh.
Go ahead.
But like, this is also probably just like the pediatric nurse in me. But with, you know, with this vaccine, with all the vaccines and people not trusting them, you know, whatever. At the end of the day, do whatever you want for like your family and your kid. My kids are going to be protected. So like, I won't have to worry about this. But, you know, you don't trust doctors. You don't trust science. The science that took years to, you know, come to fruition and make all these bad things stop. You don't trust that. But then suddenly your kid has measles. You're in the hospital with them. And that's the time that you decide to trust the same doctors and the same science when you're in crisis mode to now save your kid's life. When, let's go back into a full circle, the thing that would have saved your kid's life is getting the vaccine in the first place. Like, you can't. I actually remember having kind of like a thought with a mom one time. She was, you know, very not into the vaccines, yada, yada, yada. And then, because her thing was like big pharma. She didn't like big pharma. You know, whatever. It's your right to not like them. But then had this whole conversation with the team during rounds. Because her, like, it was like an infant. They were there for a while. We're like, all right, it's like time for whatever vaccines. And had a whole discussion and she didn't want to do it. And then like 20 minutes later after rounds, she came up to me and she asked me where our outpatient pharmacy was because she had to go get her Keppra, which is a seizure medicine. Like, you know, very popular, made by Big Pharma. So then in my head, I'm thinking, like, you just went on this whole diatribe that you don't trust Big Pharma, but you're trusting Big Pharma with your seizure medicine that's like keeping you alive.
Yeah.
It's just...
There's definitely fallacious reasoning and breakdown in the logic. Yep. I think one other piece that I commonly hear is a autonomy and like ability to make a decision for your own body, that people don't like being told what to do.
Yeah. And like they hear that like something's a requirement and no one wants to be required to do anything.
Yeah. And if we didn't say it out loud, the the MMR vaccine is safe and effective at preventing measles. And
like, okay, so a lot of people listening to this who maybe they have young children. They're probably like our age, maybe a little older.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that when you were in school, measles wasn't a thing is because your parents got you vaccinated.
Yeah.
That's why, like, you never got measles and you never, you never got any of the things that we're vaccinating against.
Yeah.
So just, some food for thought.
And if you've made it this far through the episode, we'll talk a little bit about some practical tips, how to handle it if, God forbid, you or a loved one or a neighbor get measles. So if you suspect measles, call your doctor or nurse, especially if your child has a fever and a rash. Don't go to the doctor's office without calling first. That's a big one. And then in another sense, if you're wondering, like if you don't have vaccine records, I've seen this come up a couple times. What you are able to do is you can request labs drawn that will look at something called titers. Titers are the levels of antibody that are present in the blood, and they can look at antibodies specific for different things. So there's an antibody for measles, mumps, and rubella, and there's a lab that can be drawn. So if you're curious, you weren't sure if you were vaccinated, you can do that. And there's an associated catch-up schedule that is very commonly used. The CDC has it published online that you can use if you don't have the MMR vaccine and you would like to get it and stop the madness.
Mm-hmm.
So in conclusion, we just want to reiterate that this is an incredibly important vaccination, that all of this could have been prevented, and here we are. Measles has its complications, and it is incredibly contagious. I really encourage you to talk to your own doctor or your own nurse about the MMR vaccine if you're concerned about it. And most importantly, thank you for coming back to this week's episode of Your Checkup. Hopefully today you were able to learn something for yourself, a loved one, or
a neighbor.
Please check out our website. Send us some fan mail. You can send us an email if you would like. Message us wherever. We'd love to hear from you. We appreciate all of our abroad listeners who have been coming back fast and furious. We got Belgium this last week.
Oh, yeah, we did.
So just wanted to shout them out. France, we see you coming out to party all the time. Japan as well, Germany, Turkey, Ukraine. So thank you all. Thank you for our local listeners who always come back and support us. Please come back next time. But until then, stay healthy, my friends. I'm at Delesky.
I'm Nicole Aruffo.
Thank you and goodbye.
Bye.
This information may provide a brief overview of diagnosis, treatment, and medications. It's not exhaustive and is a tool to help you understand potential options about your health. It doesn't cover all details about conditions, treatments, or medications for a specific person. This is not medical advice or an attempt to substitute medical advice. You should contact a healthcare provider for personalized guidance based on your unique circumstances. We explicitly disclaim any liability relating to the information given or its use. This content doesn't endorse any treatments or medications for a specific patient. Always talk to your healthcare provider for a complete information tailored to you. In short, I'm not your doctor.
I am not your nurse.
And make sure you go get your own checkup with your own personal doctor.